Parshas Parah. We know that in the weeks prior to Pesach, we have the Dalet Parshas, and the second last one is Parshas Parah. After Parshas Parah is Parshas HaChodesh, and then we come to Pesach, Shabbos HaGodel, and Pesach. And the Medrash says that really we should lane Parshas Parah after Parshas HaChodesh, because chronologically, first was Parshas HaChodesh, was in Rosh Chodesh Nisan, and then the second day, the next day, where they were given the Parshas of Parah Aduma, the halachos of Parah Aduma. But why do we lane Parshas Parah first? Dr. Rishalmi, why do we lane Parshas Parah first? Because he ta'arosan shel kol Yisrael. Because that's the Tara of Kol Yisrael, of Gans Klal Yisrael. And of course the obvious question arises is that it's not the Tara of all of Klal Yisrael. It's the Tara for those who are Tamei Mesa. Someone who was Tomei Meis came into contact with a mess or in an oil of mace, he became Tomei. He needed the purification, he needed the Tara. And before Pesach, where Klal Yisrael has to be makriv the Korban Pesach, all of Klal Yisrael comes together to be makriv the Korban Pesach. They have to be tahor, they have to be pure. So they need the Parah Aduma, the ashes of the Parah Aduma. But it's only for those who were Tamei Mesa. So why does Yerushalmi refer to it as Taharosan shel Kol Yisrael, the Tahara of Gans Klal Yisrael? And that's the reason that we lane it before we read Parshas Parah, before Parshas HaChodesh, because of this significant factor that it's Taharosan shel Kol Yisrael. What does that mean? It's the Tahara of Gans Klal Yisrael. Now we know that Parah Aduma is the example, the dogma of a chayk. That is, when we want to give the epitome of the example of what is a chayk, that is Parah Aduma. We take the ashes of the Parah Aduma, we mix it with the water. It is metaher tameim, people who are tamei become tahor, but on the other hand, it's metameh taharim, people who were tahor and came into contact with it, it makes them tamei. So this is the classic example of a chayk which we don't understand the reasonings. You burn the parah, you mix the ashes with water, it's metame taharim, it's metar tameim, and this is a chayk, and as Rashi brings down, this is that the umas ha'olam are moinim oisanu aleim. This is what the umas ha'olam, they deride us, they scoff at us. But you take ashes and you're going to say now it creates some purity and it's matar tameim and vice versa. So this is a dogma. When we want to give a dogma of a chayk, it's Parah Aduma. It's Parah Aduma. And as Rashi says, and this is what the umas are moinin oisanu. They deride us, they scoff at us, they make fun of us. But it's very interesting that here we see that the chukim are what the goyim, they laugh at us and they make fun of us. But in Parshas V'eschanan, the Torah says, "Re'ei limadati eschem chukim umishpatim." Re'ei limadati eschem chukim umishpatim kasher tzivan Hashem Elokai la'asais ken b'kerev as asher tem boim sham l'rishta. So Moshe Rabbeinu says that I've commanded you with chukim umishpatim. Ushmatim v'asisim, so you should perform these mitzvahs. Ki hi chachmaschem uvinaschem l'nei amim. This is how you'll be considered wise. You'll be considered wise, smart people before the nations. You keep these chukim, you keep these mishpatim, you'll be considered wise in front of the nations. Asher yishmu, and as kol chukim me'ela, the goyim will hear all about all these chukim which we don't understand the reasons for. V'amru, and they will declare, Rak am chacham v'nova nagoya gadol hazeh. And they will declare this nation, they were here about the Yidden, they said this nation must be a very exceedingly wise people, a wise nation. Ki mi goy godol asher Elokim kroim alav kashem gavol kol kroim alav. Umi goy godol asher aloi chukim umishpatim tzadikim. And which nation has these great righteous chukim? Chukim umishpatim kechol haTorah zot asher noich noisam v'neichem hayoyim. Amazing. On the one hand, we're saying that Parah Aduma is a chayk. And the chayk, the goyim laugh at us for this chayk. What are you doing? What do you think you're doing something with taking the ashes of the Parah Aduma? On the other hand, Moshe Rabbeinu is instructing us, and he's being mezaras us and mechazik us, and says, keep these chukim, ushmatim v'asisam oisam, ushmatim v'asisam, these chukim umishpatim. To this you'll be considered wise before the people, for the nations. And they will declare and they say, which nation, where is there a nation that has such chukim, such wondrous chukim? So what is the pshat with these? Are the chukim, are they the laws that the goyim make fun of us, or they praise us? What are chukim? Now chukim are things, or those are the mitzvahs, we do not understand the reasons. So perhaps the pshat is as follows. When looking at a particular chayk, they don't understand the reasons. It looks bizarre to them. What are you doing with the ashes? It's matar tameim, it's matama tahirim. What is this all about? So it's something that they could scoff at us. But on the other hand, if they see the results, if they see the end result, that there is this nation that does all these strange things, which we don't understand. They perform all these bizarre customs and rituals and laws, and we can't fathom them. But the result is, at the end result, we see this nation that is God's people, the nation of Hashem. Look at the Teitzah. Look at the result. The Shekhinah is in them. The Shekhinah rests upon them. They're elevated. They're refined. They live b'ne'imus. Their lives are lives that we would like to emulate if we could, but we can't reach up to that. They see that this is an Am Hashem. They don't understand the individual chukim. And to them, the chukim seems bizarre. It seems so strange. And initially, they can easily laugh at them. But when they see the Teitzah, the result of a nation, a people that keeps these chukim and are the nation of Hashem, the Shekhinah is share on them. They see what an elevated, what a refined, what a wondrous people. This to this, and in this they will praise us. All nations have the laws. All the nations have laws based on rational thought. They have mishpatim. But Klal Yisrael has chukim umishpatim, chukim and mishpatim, different types of mishpatim that are based on the Torah. And look at the results. And the Goyim will say, this is a wondrous nation. We cannot emulate this. We cannot be elevated like they are. We don't have the Shekhinah that's Shera on us. We don't have the Siyata D'Shmaya, the Nisim and the Siyata D'Shmaya and the Yad Hashem. And to live that kind of quality of refined, elevated life. So the Chukim are really, they're understood in a dual capacity. On the surface, but as the result of a nation, ushmatim v'asisim, then they're the source of our praise. They're the source of our glory, of our honor and our glory. But how does that come about? That comes about when we are the Am Hashem, when we perform these chukim with the right intention, and ushmartem v'asisem, when we learn them, when we're oisik in them, we accept them in the proper way, then we become this elevated nation. So perhaps the Pshat in Yerushalmi is as follows: we learn Parshas Parah before Parshas HaChodesh, Ki Taharosan Shel Kol Yisrael. This is the tar of Kol Yisrael when we're oisik in the limud of this chayk of paraduma. We can't perform the actual physical sprinkling of the water where it's Tmei Mason, and we don't have the ashes of the paraduma where Tmei Mason. We don't have the Kohen Gadol. However, if we're oisik and the shmartim v'asisa, there's shmartim v'asisa, then that's taharos and shel kol Yisrael, meaning not the physical purity, but the tara of it, the toitzah, and we become elevated through oisik in the chukim. We become elevated. We have this component of being elevated through the chukim, even when we can't actually perform the maisa, but there's a shmartem va'asisen. When we're oisik in the limud of it and the learning of it, we also obtain some of this ruchnius of the chuk, of the Am Hashem. We show our allegiance to Hashem, that we're makabel on ourselves all of the chukim, and we learn the chukim. We're makabel on ourselves the chayk that we don't understand the reasons for, and then we do become elevated, and we have a me'ain of this kihi chachmasim binasim. This is Tarja Kol Yisrael before Pesach. We have to elevate ourselves. We have to rise up and elevate ourselves, and we do this thing oisik through the limud of the kriya of the chayk, and that's part of it. The part of the laning. The laning is even when we can't do the hazoya, but we do the laning and the learning and the accepting of the chayk and the accepting of the intention of the chayk. It also elevates. So we're Am Hashem. We are Am Hashem by accepting and performing that. The Sisei Kayan remarks, there's a famous question on the Chukas HaTorah. Zois Chukas HaTorah, the Meforshim and Meforshim ask, why does it say Zois Chukas HaTorah? Zois Chukas HaParah. We're talking about Parshas Chukas, the Parsha of Paraduma. Why does it say Zois Chukas HaTorah? It should say Zois Chukas HaParah. Dr. Sifsei Kayan, it says, Vaydamar Shalom Moshe Ran Lamor, Zois Chukas HaTorah Shetziv Hashem Lamor, twice Lamor. There's another type of lamor. There's the performing of the hazoya, of the sprinkling of the waters of the paraduma. There's a time, it's a remez to a time, when we won't be able to do the asiya, but we will have to and be able to do the shmira, the limud, zois chukas ha-Torah. There's a chukah of the Torah besides, in addition to performing the mitzvah of the sprinkling of the waters, but when we can't, there's a zois chukas ha-Torah by learning the Torah of it, by Yisrael and the Torah of it. There's a second lamor to say, to speak out, to be a lamor, to speak out and learn out the Torah when we can't perform the actual sprinkling of it. There's a mitzvah of zois chukas ha-Torah, and to be Yisrael in the Torah of the chayk, of the paraduma. And that's what we have, this opportunity before Pesach, this obligation, this opportunity before Pesach to be Isaac in the chayk and elevate ourselves, prepare ourselves for Pesach. Metaros and shel kol Yisrael, if we can't do it physically, but the tarosa and the neshama, to prepare ourselves and elevate ourselves and bring ourselves up to this madrega. But of course, as we know with the chayk, that's where the Sultan is mekatrig. And that's where it is so precious and so lofty, and it's such a high madrega, that's where the Sultan is mekatrig. And that's where he encourages people to have chalishas in it. Goyim will laugh at us. We don't understand it. The Sultan, the Yetzer Hara, says, what are you doing? Why do you understand? And that is the principle. When there's something that's so lofty and so precious and so high, that's where the Sultan puts all his forces and tries to bring us down. The inyan of the chayk and paraduma is to elevate ourselves for Pesach. That Pesach should be an elevated Chag, a Zman of Cheres, where we rise above the nations, where the nations praise us and say, Rak am chacham v'navoin agoy agodol hazeh, not when we try to emulate the nations. Our preparation for Pesach, and certainly our Pesach, should be one where we are a Am Yisrael, an Am Hashem, and our Pesach is an Am, as a Chag of Cherus, where we break away from the Memtez Sharei Tum of Mitzrayim. And we have that ability to do it because we are an Am Hashem and we can be elevated. And it's precisely there where the Satan tries to get involved and confuse the issues, and instead of us elevating ourselves above the nations, tries to encourage us through this special Chag, through Pesach, this man of Cherus, of separating and elevating from the nations, tries to encourage us to copy the other nations, to emulate them. And just to conclude with a Maisa illustrating this, where the Satan, in the most precious times and the most precious mitzvahs and the greatest opportunities for growth and development, that's where the Satan, specifically there, is where the Satan brings out all his forces. He brings out all of his artillery. He has masses his forces, and to try to ensure that we don't take advantage of these great mitzvahs. That's where the Satan makes his great battle. That's where he positions his forces, his weapons, his armory. In a different context, but illustrating the same principle, many years ago, Rav Simcha Wasserman Zatzal, so he was in his advanced age, and he was still running around the world, traveling the world, raising funds to build the yeshiva in Yerushalayim, Yeshiva Or Elchanan, after his father, Rav Elchanan Wasserman Zatzal. And even in his advanced age, he was still traveling and meeting people and trying to solicit funds. He came to Toronto. He had this chos that he used to stay by me. And he asked me to approach a certain gvir to solicit funds for the yeshiva. Now, this gvir already had a pledge. He had pledged a certain amount to the yeshiva, and he hadn't paid in a number of years, so he asked me to go with him. I was a young man at the time, but nevertheless, he asked me to go with him and approach this gvir and ask him if he could start making payments on his pledge. We came to his office, and they put us in the waiting room, and we were waiting. We were waiting and waiting and waiting, and I was getting a little fidgety and then feeling very, very bad for the kavod of Rav Simcha, that he's an elderly Rosh Yeshiva, and we're waiting and waiting. I went up to the reception, and they said, "Don't worry, so-and-so, Mr. So-and-so will be out soon." So we continued to wait. Now, this office was in the outskirts of the city. It took us quite a while to get to the office to begin with. And here we are waiting and waiting. It's okay, so we continued to wait. And Rav Simcha is calm the whole time. He's calm during all of this, and he's not getting upset, not getting flustered. And again, we wait more, another 20 minutes, and I approach again the reception. Don't worry, he's coming out. And again, this repeats itself over and over, and we must have been waiting over there. And we probably traveled to his office 30, 45 minutes. We were probably waiting an hour and a half to 2 hours. Just waiting there. Finally, the gvir comes out, and he warmly greets Rav Simcha, Shalom Aleichem, how are you? He's warm to greet. They sit down, and he doesn't bring us into the office. We sit down in the reception for a couple of minutes, and they exchange pleasantries. And then they bring up the topic of the pledge is brought up, and he looks in amazement. And he says, "You know my business is not what it used to be. Surely you must know my business is not what it used to be. I can't make a payment now. I can't give you any money now." So after all of that, we went away completely empty-handed and made our trip back to the city. And Rav Simcha the whole time is calm during the wait, before, after this Maisa. He's completely calm and not in the least, doesn't seem to be upset or bothered, troubled, not in the least. Of course, the yeshiva needs money. Rabbeinu Shalom will take care of it. And for me, it was a little challenging. I was a young man at the time, and it was a little challenging to see the P'chisas HaKavod to the Rosh Yeshiva. He turned to me, Rav Simcha, and he said, David, you should know, the greatest simcha a person can have in this world is the simcha that he has from another person. When people are biyadidas, when they have chaverim, when there is closeness and shalom, that's the greatest simcha in this world. And it's davka there, where the greatest opportunities. It's davka there where the Satan brings out all his forces and tries to topple a person, and tries to instill machlokes, and tries to instill sinas chinam and lashon hara, and all the types of terrible averos bein adam u'chaveroi. The Yetzer Hara is so strong because it's such a great, great opportunity. It's one of the greatest opportunities that a person has, great source of simcha that he has. So there, in these places, we have to be extra vigilant, because we know the Satan is lurking. We have this opportunity to elevate ourselves for our Pesach, to rise above, to be a nation that is greater and above all the nations, that they will admire us, look up to us, desire to emulate us, but know that it's beyond their grasp, and they would declare, Rak am chacham v'noven agoy agodol hazeh. We should take every opportunity, be vigilant, and take our opportunity to rise above, to elevate ourselves towards this great chag.